Welcome to Between the Lines. I'm John Matisonn. We're coming to you tonight from the Garrison Church on Robben Island. My guest was the Archbishop of Cape Town for 11 years, Archbishop Emeritus Njongonkulu Ndungane. Welcome, Your Grace. Thank you for being my guest. It must be strange being here. You spent 3 years as a prisoner on Robben Island.
I did. My prison sentence was 3 years. I think I may have spent about 20 months on Robben Island. 20 months, how was that? I was one of the first political prisoners to leave for Victor Verster to go and start building up that prison. I always say that my claim to fame is that I built prisons for Mandela. So I spent part of my sentence here.
But that's now 50 years ago. What goes through your mind when you come back here?
Well, I think that it brings back some memories that here were people who were concerned for justice, for freedom, and for the liberation of South Africa. And that we gave our time for that cause. We were young people. I was in my 20s when I came here. But it was a great joy and an encouragement to know that you were in the company of people like Nelson Mandela, Mangaliso Sobukwe, and all the struggle stalwarts were incarcerated here.
This place also has another significance for you because this is where you decided to become a priest.
Yes, strange things happen in people's lives. I was an angry young man, and I think that I wrestled with God whilst I was a prisoner here, looking at the majestic Table Mountain and saying that how can a good God who has created the world so good allow so much suffering and injustice in our country?
And how did you resolve that in your mind?
Well, it was not a resolution in my mind. I think that I just had at some stage a calmness and a peace, as if God had touched me and said, I want to use you for the ministry of reconciliation.
And now we've been attending a conference here this week, and you've heard young people say they don't really want to listen to the anti-apartheid leaders of your generation. They feel they've been betrayed, let down.
I think that the importance of a dialogue like this is to create that kind of platform so as to take away the misconceptions when people come to have a reality in terms of the fact that in the 60s we were in the same position as where they are. But the difference is that we knew about the contributions of people like Nelson Mandela, like Sobukwe, the struggle stalwarts, and that we were journeying with them, incarcerated with them in this island. And I think that it's been my dream to have these interactions with the intergenerational dialogues so as to take away those misconceptions.
But you yourself, in your 11 years as Archbishop, you had a great many differences with the government. You disagreed fiercely over many things, starting with the arms deal.
Yes, definitely. I think that was a very unwise step we took because I indicated that we don't have any enemy on our borders, and why spend so much money on this particular arms deal. And also, we emphasize that we are not a pacifist church, although there are pacifists in our church. We understand the fact that it is the responsibility of the state to protect its citizens. And we were saying that instead of going for a sedan, they were going for a Rolls Royce. And so we were challenging all those things. We also challenged the whole question of honoring the odious apartheid debt. And we had no business to do that. We had a lot of issues to address in terms of poverty, in terms of inequality, in terms of education.
And bringing it closer to the present, you've been an opponent of the nuclear energy deal.
Oh, definitely.
That it seems that this government is going forward with.
Oh, definitely. I think that we need to make our voices loud and clear on this. Because what Zuma and his administration are bent on doing is to bankrupt our country and our grandchildren and our children's children to swim in this massive debt that's being done.
Tell me, when you were in office and now that you're Emeritus Archbishop, does the government listen to you? Do they engage with you?
Well, there's no engagement. They never even listened to me when I was in office. We made statements, and I think that in some areas they did take note of what's being said. I think that in terms of this homophobic American priest, I made some noise, and I think that the Minister of Home Affairs took note of that. And so I think that it is always the right thing for church leadership to say, this is the way, walk in it, speaking truth to power.
We're going to have to take a break. We'll be right back with the Archbishop. And we're back talking on Robben Island to Archbishop Ndungane. The government may listen to you to some degree on something like a homophobic priest because there's no real political cost. But it seems that what you've alluded to is a kind of arrogance, and the government has now started to find that the public is seeing the government as arrogant and starting to discount their views.
Well, I think that in the statement I issued after the elections, I said it's a wake-up call for the governing party, which has become very arrogant and not listening to the people. And I think that there's a swell of opinion in various circles in terms of noting the ills that are in our society.
But do you think that that goes far enough? The government doesn't seem to have reacted very much to this election. What is your message to the ANC now?
Well, the ANC is a broad church, and I would want to acknowledge that there are some very resourceful people in the ANC. And I think that it's about time those energies that have sort of been sidelined come up and let their voices be known. The fact that there are some stalwarts within the ANC who are making some noises indicates that there is a reckoning that all is not well.
Do you think, do you add your voice to the call that Jacob Zuma must go as president?
Well, I think that it's the Constitutional Court finding that he has violated the oath of office is sufficient proof for him to take his bags and go to Nkandla and relax.
The politicians who've been elected this time are taking what seems like a more moral stance on some things. They seem to be more committed to non-racialism. I interviewed Dennis Goldberg on this program a couple of weeks ago, and he said with great sadness that the ANC ran a racist campaign, and some of the opposition parties, the DA, I think he mentioned, was non-racial. Now they're in power. There are mayors who seem to be fighting corruption. So far, we have yet to see, but with greater vigor. Does that please you?
Well, I think that anything that seeks to stick by the tenets that are within the Constitution do actually please us. And I think that we very much disliked the racist policies that were being articulated prior to the elections by the leadership of the ANC, when in fact we have indicated that we are committed to a non-sexist, non-racial South Africa and building that inclusive society in our constitutional democracy.
One could say that it was the genius of the Constitution or the majesty of democracy that when people in government forget their masters, who are the ordinary citizens, they get punished at the polls, and that's really a sign that the Constitution is in good shape.
All right, and that our democracy is working. And I think that what we as citizens of South Africa need to be doing is to stiffen our spines in deepening the democracy, in guarding, safeguarding the institutions that are sort of keeping us on the straight and narrow. I think it was my favorite theologian, American theologian, Reinhold Niebuhr, who had this dictum that man's capacity for justice makes democracy possible. Man's inclination to injustice makes democracy necessary. And therefore, it's important for us to have those independent institutions like the public protector, the judiciary, the constitutional court, to safeguard, to guard us from ourselves when we are tempted to go the other way.
And the next big issue on the table already, according to the latest news, is the nuclear deal. Now, you've already spoken out about the nuclear deal.
I have indeed. I mean, in my opening remarks here, I've said that that is what we do not need. In fact, there have been people who have been talking about alternative sources of energy, yes, which are environmentally friendly in the first instance. But I think that this nuclear deal, there's something smelling about it, in that there's no transparency in the first instance. And also,
it's not even in the official national energy plan.
That's it. And also, we have been told that it's going to cost trillions of rands, and getting ourselves further into debt. And that's just not on when we talk about the challenges in front of us, when we are faced with the educational crisis in terms of making resources available for tertiary education.
This makes me think about the days which you and I will both remember of the 1980s, when the church and the other faith-based organizations were very active and visible. Am I wrong in thinking they're less of a force now?
Well, you are putting me in the corner in the sense that I don't want to put my predecessors in a particular whole. But I think that it is certainly true that there was much cooperation between churches as well as people of other faiths in our fight against apartheid. I think that what happened when 1994 came is that we dropped our guard because we had a governing party which stood by the ideals that we were fighting for, a governing party that we were together in the trenches. So we hoped that with the constitution such as it is, and being a constitutional democracy, that they will walk the path and that the churches sort of drop the guard a little bit. And I think as time went on, church leadership began to say, hang on, what's happening here? And I think there is a kind of reawakening and a regrouping.
You can really feel it in the country, can't you, that there's a rising, changed view and anger that these policies that show signs of immorality are not going to be tolerated anymore.
Oh yes, I think that one of the things that the governing party has not done is to listen to what we are saying. Because in 1998, under the umbrella of Sangoko, we conducted national poverty hearings. And we presented the findings to the government. And in fact, they were very cross. They were not pleased that we had some Chapter 9 institutions within the national poverty hearings, such as the Commission for Gender Equality, the Human Rights Commission. But we produced reports, and I think they're gathering dust. And in 10 years later, 2008, we had another round of national poverty hearings. And I kid you not, the level of anger I encountered amongst young people was out of this world. And I thought that we're actually sitting on another possibility of a 1976 rising.
We have to break there, but we will come back to it after the break. And we're back with the Archbishop. You just started to say before we broke for the ad break that we were looking, in 2008 you already started to fear another 1976.
Yes.
And that's really what we have now, isn't it?
Yes, yes. And you see, what struck us as commissioners, and I was the leader of those commissioners, is that is a difference between 1998 hearings and 2008. In 1998, it tended to be more mature, elderly citizens who came in. In 2008, the majority were young people. And these were taking place during the course of the week, which meant young people were not at school and young people were not at work. And the level of the anger was such that the commissioners mandated me to go and give a preliminary report, send a preliminary report to the presidency to say, hey, look, I am not an alarmist by nature, but you are sitting on a powder keg.
And what was the reaction?
Nothing.
Now, of course, we're all aware that poverty is a desperate problem. What were you suggesting? What was doable that could have started to address poverty at that time?
Well, a number of things. I cannot recall the exact reports. It's about, if we can go to
to the website, yeah.
Yes, of African Monitor. I'm sure we can get some. But obviously, it was what the young people were saying is that we have been let down by the people who are in power, who we thought were going to improve our situation.
And now that we sit in these dialogue meetings, that's exactly what the young people are saying, and they're looking at us older people in our face and saying, you've let us down. And you've abrogated your responsibility.
We're being painted with the same brush because of the fact that nothing is being done in terms of improving the lot of young people, in terms of their well-being, in terms of their future, a secure future that they want. And the majority of the people who are unemployed in our country are young people are under the age of 35. And if you are not employed when you hit 35, what chances have you got in terms of a future employment?
Absolutely.
I think it was in Mangaung where we were startled by young girls who were HIV positive. who had stopped taking, they say, we don't even take our medication. And when they were quizzed, aren't you fearful of that this could lead to your death? Says, who cares? What am I living for? Now that kind of desperation is one that sort of sends some shock waves to a person like me.
I just want to follow that up for a moment with the relationship between government and the faith organizations. When you had this report, did you meet with President Zuma? Did you have an encounter? Did you get a response?
I met with Deputy President Balekambete. That's the person I saw at the presidency. I presented this, and I don't know whether there was any follow-up. I don't think so, but we had done our responsibility of bringing the attention to the attention of government what actually was happening on the ground. And not only that, I think there was a follow-up by civil society organizations who said they wanted to partner with government in terms of the whole question of poverty alleviation and development. And I recall about 100 NGOs who had said that can we get together and find a modus operandi using our expertise and our connectivity to work with government on this. Deputy President Motlanthe was tasked to meet with this group of NGOs, and she came with some cabinet ministers, and we presented some strategies from where we are in terms of alleviating poverty. And Deputy President
Baleka Mbete.
No.
Oh, no,
it was a subsequent meeting with Deputy President Motlanthe.
Oh, okay.
And then Deputy President Motlanthe came back to me to say the word is that this will be encapsulated or collapsed into the National Development Plan. So that also fizzled out.
Now, just briefly, because we are running out of time, but President Zuma then set up his own faith leadership group under Reverend Ray Macaulay, which seemed to be a substitute for the old Council of Churches relationship. Were you aware of that?
Well, what had happened is that I think in the time of President Mbeki, there was a National Religious Leaders Forum, you see, which we are involved in. And I think that was also part of an attempt to cooperate with government. And I think that there were 5 areas that were identified where the faith communities and government would work together. Minister Zolos Kwehi, I think, was placed in charge of that. So there was that going relationship. I think President Mbeki also had periodic meetings with faith leaders. I think when President Zuma came in, he started to create his own thing and not work with the structures that had been in existence. I think it was at the time when I'd already put down my pastoral staff.
I do recall that he chose a leader who said that God had chosen President Zuma.
Yeah.
Now, we're just before we completely run out of time, I want to go back to one more controversy within your own church, and that's around gay priests and gay marriage. This has been an unsettled issue, and there has been some pain around it, but your position is clear.
Oh, yes. I'm very clear in the sense that my theology informs me that there are no aliens in God's household. And my Christian faith informs me that we are all one in Christ. There is neither Jew nor Gentile, slave nor free, straight nor gay. We are all one in Christ. And I think that it is in the good nature of ourselves to work out how we or do pastoral ministries among our brothers and sisters of homosexual orientation. And I think that we have been grappling with this issue as a church. In fact, at the 1998 Lambeth Conference, I was tasked to chair Section 1, a call to full humanity, which dealt with all the ethical issues of the day. And I think that it was very important at that meeting that within that Section 1, there was a group that was dedicated to human sexuality, about 60 bishops, drawn from extreme conservatives to radically liberal.
And did it make headway?
Sorry?
Did it work? Did it bring a
Well, the thing is, for 2 weeks, these bishops had a ding-dong, and they found one another in the end. And they said, we agree on this issue, we don't agree on this issue. Therefore, we would like this report to go back to our dioceses for further study and discussion. And
I'm afraid we're out of time. We'll have to leave it there. It's been a great pleasure. Thank you very much for being on our show. Thanks for watching. Good night.